Hola, everybody. Welcome back to the Chats with Yvonne podcast, where we talk about public speaking con cultura. I'm your host, Yvonne Armenta, and today we're going to talk about why we're so embarrassed to learn out loud. So many of us, regardless of how accomplished we are, may feel embarrassed to admit that we're still learning, or that there is something that we still could learn. No matter how many years we've been in our field, there is always something that we can learn. And I know that we all may think that, may know that, and say it out loud. O sea, we can always learn more. I'm a student of life. But what does it actually mean when it comes down to it? To really truly embody that. And might we feel a little embarrassed to actually admit that we are learning something, even when we've been doing it forever? I think that there can be some shame built around the idea that we're still learning within our expertise. It's a lot easier to say, oh, I'm learning when you're trying something new, something that you've never really tried before. It's a lot harder to admit that there's something to learn, again, when you've been doing it for years. And that shame or those feelings of embarrassment about continuing to learn might actually create a distance between the thing that you love, the thing that you're really good at, and yourself, and progress and growth. So today I want to dive into learning out loud. We're going to talk a little bit about adult learning and just the idea of, hey, I'm a speaker of 11 plus years, and there's still so much I could learn. Before we dive into today's podcast episode, y'all know I always like to start off by pulling a card from the Public Speaking con Cultura practice card deck. So let's go ahead and do that. I pulled out La Emoción, and this one is all around tone. Listen to Amor Eterno by Rosia Durcal. I love that song. And reflect on the tone, attitude, or mood that this song evokes for you and what it means to you. I wrote a little note to y'all in this card too, and it says that every time I hear this song, it does not matter the environment. It always gets me in my feelings. There's a specific essence to it that captivates me, pulls at my heartstrings, and makes me reflect deeply. And that is beautiful. First of all, that song is one of my favorites. If I ever had to learn just one song and sing it perfectly, it would be that one. And I say, as you explore your speaker identity, think about what feelings you want to evoke in your audience and write those down at the top of every speech you develop. The reason I think that that's so important, or that could be really helpful in your growth is as a speaker, is because we can all say words. We can all say words. The way that we deliver them creates the impact. And if there is a feeling, something, emotion that we want to evoke, we can do that by focusing on our tone, on how quickly we're speaking, o sea, our pace, todas esas cosas. We can focus on those things because those really truly impact the way that we deliver something. So I love to listen to other people speak, but also I love listening to music because there's something that, there's certain songs that even if they're talking about something really sad or a love lost, it's an upbeat song. That delivery is different. There's a different kind of impact. So identifying what impact you want to have as a speaker and having that visually up at the top of your speech every time that you're going to develop something is actually a really effective way of making sure that you actually do create that type of impact and that you are immersing yourself in that emotion yourself so that you can deliver that as well. I've been thinking a lot about growth, and not the polished kind of growth that we talk about on social media, but the kind that really makes you sit with your pride a little bit. Recently, I was thinking about getting a business advisor because it's really hard for me to keep track of all these moving pieces, things that I have never actually had to keep track of in their entirety 24/7. But for some reason, I felt embarrassed to ask for help. Embarrassed to admit that as a business owner, I don't have it all together. I don't know what I'm doing in every single aspect of my business. I know my craft. I know public speaking. And even then, right, there's still things to learn all the time. But I was embarrassed that in my mind, I had this concept of this into my business, this many years into my business, full time for a year into my business. And these are things I still don't know. Shouldn't I have gotten a grasp of this already? Even just by doing. I've been doing it for this long. Shouldn't I already know this stuff? And when I sit down and think about it, I think it's because obviously when we post on social media and we share our wins, we're not always going to share the moments that aren't so great. Why? Because to me, that is not part of my business. The purposes of me sharing stuff on social media is truly to say, hey, I'm an expert at what I do. I can help you with your public speaking. These are my tips around public speaking. This is how I do public speaking differently and how I think the industry can change. It's not necessarily, I'm not a business coach or a business consultant talking about my journey as an entrepreneur or as a business owner, which is why sometimes I think I don't always show that side of things on social media. And I said to myself, this business mentor that I could potentially get, or a business coach, whatever it is, might they judge me and say, pero Yvonne seems like she has her stuff together based on what she posts. Why doesn't she know this stuff? And that kept me from fully being like, I need help and reaching out. And it's almost like my brain doesn't allow for there to be a yes and answer. Yes, I have been in business for a while, and there's still so much for me to learn. In my mind, it's either I don't know it at all or I know it all. There is no in between. I don't allow myself to be in the in between. It's either I'm a newbie at this and I'm going to learn everything that I need to learn about it, and my excuse is that I'm new, or I know absolutely everything there is to know already. And when I thought about this more deeply, it wasn't that I am embarrassed to say that I don't know something or that I'm still learning, but it really was my ego speaking. And it was my ego, it was that pride that I'm saying growth requires you to sit with your pride a little bit and say, to me, this is admission of not knowing something. Instead of phrasing it like I need to learn something or there's room for me to learn, I saw it as lack. I saw it as you're admitting that you don't know this certain part of your business. And to me, I'm like, that feels really uncomfortable. I don't like that feeling. But that very feeling might be the thing that stumps our growth. Something like, if I'm a speaker of 12 plus years, why do I still struggle with filler words? Why do I still use filler words in those more casual conversations when I'm not fully prepared, when I haven't ran through my lines? Why do I still use filler words? And does me using filler words indicate to my audience my level of understanding of the art and the craft? Does that make them think that I am any less of a speaker? Would it be admitting to them that I'm not a good speaker if I say that there is still something that I need to learn, something about my speaking that I will always need to work on developing? And the answer is most definitely no, but it doesn't always feel like that. This episode is about starting to explore the links between our embarrassment, maybe our ego, and adult learning. We're not going to take a super deep dive. I don't claim to be an expert in this, but I'm going to share a couple case studies. I'm going to share a couple theories around adult learning and the links to that potential embarrassment that we feel. And I think it's important that we start off with the psychology of embarrassment in adults. All sources will be in the show notes of this podcast episode, so check them out there. What lies at the root of embarrassment is the anticipation of negative evaluation by others. We become embarrassed when we perceive that the social image we want to project has been undermined and that others are forming negative impressions of us. So think about it this way. I'm going to use myself as an example because, again, this podcast episode is about really talking to my ego and being like, girl, can you be quiet for a second? So I help you grow in your public speaking, both in the way that you deliver, in your story development, in your stage presence, and all of these different things. These are things that I have been doing and skills that I have acquired over many, many years. Are there ways that I can improve? Does my mental state impact the way that I show up on a stage on any given day? 100%. Am I a perfect speaker? No. But it feels often like I have to exude that, like I have to be a little bit perfect. Like I have to embody the transformation that I'm saying I can help you achieve, the kind of stability in your speaking skills that I can help you achieve. I wholeheartedly know that, and I believe that I have the skills to be able to do that. And I know that when we work together, y'all can feel that and you know that as well. But if there is something that I'm still learning, or if I say to you, you know what? I think I could have had a stronger opening. If I know that strong openings are maybe not my strength, that I need to ease into my speaking engagement, then I know I need to practice that some more. But perhaps, why do I have a hard time admitting that I'm not a strong opener? I don't always have strong openings. And I'm just using this as an example, but if I feel like there's room for growth, I automatically think I'm not good at that, or assume that others will think that I'm not good at that. Instead of saying, no, I am good at my openings. I do it a mi manera, and there's room for improvement. I shouldn't be embarrassed at the fact that there's room for improvement. And the fact that I'm actually aware of that means that I love this craft, that I love what I do so much that I'm willing to not be the most amazing, the best public speaker, and continue to improve. That makes me a great public speaker. That makes me equipped to do what I do. That makes me equipped to see areas of growth in your own public speaking journey. I can see improvements that I need to make in my speaking journey, and therefore I keep an eye out for those things for you too, because they matter. Embarrassment is a social emotion. It's rooted in the fear of being judged or excluded. And that's very much like public speaking. A lot of us fear public speaking because we're afraid to be judged by the way we said something, by the way we look when we're on stage, by what we actually said. And I do think that we are afraid of this judgment, but even more so, I think we're afraid to be seen as incompetent. Like, you have a business, what do you mean you don't know how to market it? You're a speaker, but how come the other day I heard you use hella filler words? And I've come to realize, for me, is that I need a me. We all need an us. What you do for other people, you need someone like you to do that same thing for you. I don't know about anybody else, but I am so good. Within 5 minutes of us talking together, I am so good at picking out what your signature topic will be and then working on that story development. But when I sit there with all of my thoughts, I'm like, geez, I need someone to hear me speak out loud and make sense of these things and see what I'm not seeing, feel what I'm not feeling. I still need help. I'm damn good at what I do, and I still need help. Now I want to talk about adult learning theory because I think it has so much to do with this idea of why am I so embarrassed? Adults bring identity and pride to learning. There's that pride, there's that ego. And they don't want to look incompetent. So we're going to talk through some of the theories of adult learning as proposed by Knowles. Again, this will be in the show notes. There's this this idea of the self-concept. As a person matures, their self-concept moves from one of being a dependent personality toward one of being a self-directed human being. We go from I am dependent on you for learning to now learning is my own. Now I have to take responsibility for this, especially once you're out of school and all of that. Now the burden of learning falls on me alone, and I need to figure it out type of thing. That's how I'm interpreting it. The adult learner experience. As a person matures, he, she, they accumulates a growing reservoir of experience that becomes an increasing resource for learning. So our learning now comes from our experiences. That makes sense. Readiness to learn. As a person matures, their readiness to learn becomes oriented increasingly to the developmental tasks of his or her or their social roles. So our learning then becomes associated with how we have to operate in the world, what we need, the skills, the tools that we need to do what we're doing in the world. If you're a public speaker, if you're a business owner, if you are a product-based person, if you're a creative, now your learning is not so much learning everything, but your specific learning is attached to the things that you do within a society. Orientation to learning. As a person matures, his or her, their time perspective changes from one of postponed application of knowledge to immediacy of application. As a result, their orientation toward learning shifts from one of subject-centeredness to one of problem-centeredness. So we are no longer learning for the purposes of grasping a subject. we are now only learning when there's a problem. Isn't that so interesting? And the fact that there is a problem to solve, that's where our learning comes into play. And that could be a good or a bad thing, right? Or not good or bad, but just there's pros and cons to that concept of our understanding of learning, is that I now am only going to learn when I come across something that I need to solve versus for enjoyment or for the purposes of growth is great. I am going to grow when there is learning involved. And it's not because I'm a bad public speaker. It's because there's room for growth. And this subject, I want to master and learn this subject and this art form. Instead of approaching our learning maybe from, I just want to really love and learn public speaking and immerse myself in the arts, we're like, I feel like I suck. I feel like I use too many filler words. I feel like I just got way too nervous. And that's the way that we approach the learning. That is crazy to me because I think that really does impact the way that we approach the art. If we are approaching the art from a lens of there's a problem to solve, how might that dictate our relationship with public speaking? And might it make it just not that enjoyable? Now, on the motivation to learn, the theory says that as a person matures, the motivation to learn is internal. That makes sense to me because now I'm not in school, so I don't need to learn something for the purposes of a grade. I'm simply learning something because I kind of want to. Or again, external factors, right? Your career, or you want to grow as a speaker, but that comes from you instead of from the outside world. And now on psychological safety. Amy Edmondson defines psychological safety as a shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. And she highlights that without it, individuals are less likely to engage in risks like asking a basic question. This is because they might fear being ridiculed, punished, or humiliated for speaking up, even with a seemingly simple query. We're not necessarily afraid of being wrong, afraid of not knowing something. We're afraid of being seen being wrong. We're afraid of being seen not knowing something. I want to talk about how this might show up in our public speaking. And that is that, let's say you are a person that has been speaking and presenting for over 5 years. And again, you used one too many filler words. It has nothing to do with your skill set as a speaker and everything to do with the way that we practice it and our understanding of when, how, and why we use filler words. Admitting that that is something that we need to work on is not an indicator of whether you're a good, quote, good or quote, bad public speaker. It might be the equivalent of when someone freezes up because they get feedback. We don't see that as, oh, I'm learning. We don't see that as a space for us to grow. We might see it as a failure. If I get feedback that is not good feedback, that means that I'm not good. That means that I suck as a speaker. Doesn't that sound crazy to say out loud? None of us are perfect. No one is the best public speaker out there. No one is. Because here's the other thing. To have been in the corporate space presenting on projects, for example, or speaking to companies internally is not the same as being a keynote speaker. Delivering to an in-person audience of folks that you really don't know and you don't work with every day. There's a slight difference in the story development and in the delivery techniques. Every single kind of public speaking asks us to show up differently. And so if you've been doing, corporate presentations for a super long time, there's a certain communications technique that you use there when you're delivering to make sure that the message lands. Okay, you're a great speaker. But maybe there's room for growth when it comes to being a keynote speaker and delivering a message with this different kind of delivery for a different kind of impact. And I'm speaking to myself here too, in that the things that I know I need to improve on as a speaker, as a business owner, those are not embarrassing. I should not be embarrassed by them. And I need to confront them and confront my ego a little bit and confront my pride and confront the actually unlearn the things that tell me that I should just figure it out on my own and dive into research when there are people that have already done this. There are people that have the skill sets and want to help you. My expertise does not cancel out the need for support. Your expertise does not cancel out the need for support. It's going to stump our growth if we don't actually find partnership, find support in our journeys, wherever those may be, whether that's public speaking or not. And I asked some of you to share your experiences with me on social media and answer a few questions. So I want to dedicate some time to sharing a little bit of the thoughts that y'all shared with me. So some of them come in the form of poll questions. I said, keeping your expertise in mind, do you feel like there are things within your field that you should already know because of your age, role, or experience level? It was a yes or no response. 76% of you said yes, 24% of you said no. Again, keeping in mind the thing that you're known for or an expert in, what's more embarrassing to you? Mispronouncing a common word, not knowing a term, admitting you're struggling, or asking a basic question out loud. Mispronouncing a common word got 23%. Not knowing a term got 25%. Admitting that you're struggling got 23%. Asking a basic question out loud got 30%. It's the basic question, right? I found that to be so interesting because asking a quote basic question out loud, it goes back to what I was mentioning around not wanting to feel incompetent. And then I asked, why do you think you might associate asking questions with weakness or incompetence? Some of you shared, our core beliefs are lack of self-trust and lack of confidence, lacking assertiveness. We feel that asking questions or not knowing something is an indicator of lack of assertiveness or confidence or trust in what we're saying. Another response, because it was like a foreign language. I remember asking, what's a major? It was intimidating. Intimidation, being intimidated by a larger than life system or thing that feels like everybody else knows what's happening, but you don't. It's like, yeah, what is a major? Why do people say major all the time? Major and minor? What? If you don't know anything about college, if you don't know how that works, if you're not immersed in that world, why would I ever use major to describe my field of study? This response, because we've been doing the job for a certain amount of time, or it's our responsibility to know the answer. Someone also shared, when I was at a new job, I was afraid to ask for clarification because in my head, I was like, I should know this. This is why they hired me. Instead, I came up with a way to ask as if I was seeking confirmation of something. Kids in school age are mean, especially in high school. If you ask questions, other students would say, ugh, you should already know that, or the teacher already said that. That influences your next chapter in life. I'd also like to read this other response that I got, which said, I think some of it is survival instinct of wanting to be superior or optimal. I also think we just live in a greedy and individualistic culture where we want to be the best and know the most. In my experience with counseling, a lot of people struggle with holding a conversation or social anxiety because they're afraid of looking dumb. Embarrassment, not being knowledgeable on a topic, awkward silences. A lot of these people approach conversations and interactions with how can I make the best impression? In therapy settings, this is what is creating the anxiety. A different perspective would be, what can I learn from this person, which takes the pressure off of the individual that initially felt anxious. So this person is actually providing us a way to ask those questions, right? Instead of how can I make the best impression, it's what can I learn from this person? And that takes a little bit of the anxiety away from us and actually puts it on the other person. It's like, okay, I'm expecting something of you. I'm not expecting something of me today. And that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. Thank you to everybody that participated in those polls and in those questions. I think talking about it is the first way of us truly deeply reflecting and being like, what things do I not ask out loud? And in what context? Because I think context matters a lot. I might be more comfortable admitting to someone that I'm still learning this if I feel comfortable with that. When I talk about public speaking is about saying it out loud, practicing it out loud. And to get really comfortable in saying it out loud in front of a crowd, we have to practice saying it out loud in front of a crowd. Or not just with ourselves. I love the concept of practice in front of your mirror, but that has never worked for me. As me going, I can practice in front of my mirror. I am perfect in front of the mirror. No filler words, nada. But as soon as I get in front of an audience, it's different. The feelings are different. What my body is doing and how it reacts to the stimuli of having an audience is different. So I always say that our practice of speaking, our learning needs to happen in community. I'm not saying I am the type of learner where I start with something by myself, internalize it, deep reflection, solitude. I enjoy learning in solitude. But the act of implementation of our learning, which is what often makes it stick, that I do believe there's so much value in doing it in community. Before we end with our Con Cultura segment, I want to ask you a few reflection questions just to get us to really think about our own learning and growth and why we should just have this conversation with our ego and our pride and be like, hey, shut up for a little bit and let me learn out loud. What is one thing that you've been avoiding because you're embarrassed to ask for help? What things do we assume people already know? And I mean, as service providers, as facilitators of learning, of workshops, what do we assume people already know or think they should know? To me, and when you're thinking about working with me, or when you're thinking about asking me for public speaking tips or whatever it is, I want you to know that there is no expectation from me. There is no expectation of where I think or assumption of where you are in your journey. And I do not judge you for anything, any part of that public speaking journey, no matter where you are in it. There is absolutely nothing that you have to prove to me. I just ask that you show up and be committed to saying it out loud, to say something out loud, and commit to the art of public speaking and your craft and developing it and developing and growing your skills. And this is whether you were just starting or you've been on the biggest of stages. I do not have any assumptions about where you are in your public speaking journey. If anything, I'm thankful to you for allowing me the space to nerd out, to do what I really love to do. All right. Ahora sí, we are going to end our podcast episode today with our segment Con Cultura. And I wanted this to relate to what we've been talking about as far as adult learning. I was thinking about two things that came up for me when I was thinking about, gosh, why do we feel so embarrassed to continue to learn all of the time? I realized that growing up, how many times did we hear, ya estás grande, ya estás muy grande para eso, o ya estás grande como para andar con esas cosas. That feels like that carries some judgment, and it feels like there is a cutoff for learning. Quite literally, it's the concept of ya creciste, you're old, you're this old already. That means that you should have learned that. You should have learned all of that already. And so again, that bleeds into the way that we experience growth, or that we like to or not to admit that there is still something that we need to learn. We've been hearing that since we were little. Ya estás grande para andar con tus cosas. Ya estás grande para esto. Ya estás grande como para saber cómo hacer esto. If we've been hearing that since we were like 6-7 years old and we were kids, now imagine what it's like to be learners as adults. And the other thing is that on the flip side, our cultura also teaches us a lot about hosting, cultivating, creating, curating learning spaces where we can actually learn. And they don't always have to look like your traditional classrooms. These are things like pláticas. These are things like cafecito y chisme times. For example, when I put together our public speaking workshops, to me, creating storytelling like our abuelitas, the workshop, it was about practicing our public speaking, talking about public speaking and our storytelling, but in a space that didn't feel as intimidating, that didn't feel as formal, because the formality of the learning impacts the way that we internalize it and continues to associate public speaking with something that is scary or something that is intimidating or that we don't want to do. When really, maybe just changing the space and the structure of how we learn can help us internalize that. If anything, I hope that this podcast episode gets you to start reflecting on those reasons why we may feel embarrassed. Is it ego? Is it because we don't want to appear incompetent? Is it because I'm not in a space that is psychologically safe for me to inquire, for me to feel like I can learn? let's start finding those communities. I hope that you can find community in the workshops that I host, the club, our public speaking club that is coming out very soon, sooner than you expect. I swear, I promise this time. These are the kinds of spaces that we want to be learning in. And if you can't and don't have a community to feel like, hey, can I trust this person with my not knowing? And know that they are not going to judge me for it or think that I am any less skilled in it, right? We also, as the recipients of someone coming to us and saying, hey, there's still something that I need to learn, we also have to check our judgment at the door. And we have to tell our ego and our pride to be like, hey, just because they are learning this or they're not that great at this yet, or they're still learning some of this and growing in it, doesn't mean they're bad or not good at what they do. So I know you've probably heard this, but let's get out of our own way. Let's get out of our own way more often. Tell that ego and that pride to stay outside while you do your learning, and let's leverage the power of our communities, because there's a reason why you were given a set of unique skill sets that I wasn't given, that I'm still learning. There's a reason why I have a certain set of skill sets and lived experiences that you don't. And the reason is that we are all supposed to be contributing to each other's growth, to each other's journey. That's how the world works. I mean, I think that's how the world should work anyway. Don't be afraid to be a learner. It is a beautiful thing to be in a constant state of learning. Studying yourself as a speaker is how you can continue to grow as a speaker. So I hope that you're inspired to continue in your learning journey. Wherever you are in your journey, that is perfect. And it is not an indicator of skill set, and rather an indicator of passion for what you do. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the Chats with Yvonne podcast. Share this with your tías, everybody and their mamas. Y nos vemos a la próxima. Bye, y'all.